Fernando, welcome to the underground.
Thanks for having me back.
This is way better than Zoom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, way better than Zoom. Glad you could fit us in between your all your world travels. My God,
South
Jeez.
America, is that where? How long were you there for?
Yeah, I just came back from South America. I was there for 8 months.
8 months. What do you do in South America? Like, what do you do when I'm sure you're doing work with that, but what are you doing in South America when you're not working?
It's the same thing as here. So instead of, going out to, Fulton Market, I go out to Rio or Sao Paulo and then have a good time out there. I actually have an apartment down there now. So we're doing some rehab down there. It was a good time.
Nice. So you just rent the place? Is it like normal, like compared to here, where you just go and sign a lease?
No, this one I bought.
Oh, okay. Oh, you bought something there. Oh, man. So
nice.
What, buying something in a different country, like how's that, just high level, how different is that?
Yeah, so my family's Brazilian. So I have dual citizenship. So for me, it's not that big of a deal, but I'm assuming I'm going to have to go through this pretty soon because I'm looking at buying a place in Portugal as well. So I'll check back and tell you guys how difficult it is to buy.
Do you speak Portuguese?
I do, yeah, fluently. And then
we got the intro's gonna happen before we do this though, so we keep our mouths shut.
Oh yeah.
Confuse our listeners. They already heard the intro.
They know. There's no secret. They know we do it before.
So, all right. So let's level set here, Fernando. We had you on episode 86. For those interested in self storage, it's a great episode. It's one of the only ones we've done on the topic.
Correct.
It talks about your origin. You were doing a ton of wholesaling here. Said, screw it. I'm done with this. I'm shifting. I'm pivoting. When we had you on, I believe you had I think it was 50 million under management. Give us an idea just right now, like how much you've grown in the last 4 years. Share some of those stats with the listeners.
Yeah, so we're up to 230 million. That's 50. We just closed on our 54th facility, and we're in 24 states now. So
you were only in 2 or 3 states before.
I think it was like Illinois, Tennessee, North Carolina when we first started. And now we're kind of all over the place. It's just as we find deals, we're not really state specific. It just has to hit all of our underwriting criteria. And then the way that we were able to get up to that point is to really kind of put the gas on the fire for syndications. So now we have a little over 900 investors that invest in our deals.
Wow. So how much of the 54 is new construction versus maybe rehab or whatever you would call it?
Yeah. So usually we're doing from a deal perspective, about 25 to 30% in new construction. From a dollars perspective, it's about 50-50 because those new construction deals are, minimum 10 to 14, maybe $16 million a piece versus the one that we buy from the mom and pop operators. Those are going to be in the $2 to $5 million range.
Got it. All right. We got a ton to unpack, but I know it's step 1, step 2, step 3. I know you're a big traction guys,
Right.
Just like Mark here at GC. But how, this is a big number, man,
Yeah.
right? Like, talk to us about just finding deals. Everyone's been bitching for 4 years that there's no deals, and
Right.
you have 5x your company that was already pretty large.
Yeah.
So how? What happened?
Yeah. So, obviously when I first started and when I came on the podcast last time, we were coming right off of that zero interest rate policy period from the Fed. So getting debt was very cheap, which then caused a lot of transaction volume. Since then, interest rates have basically doubled. So we've had to become really creative on not only marketing, but then finding ways to structure deals that still make sense for our investors. So on the front end, on the marketing piece, making sure that we're standing out. So these sellers, just like in the residential space, multifamily space, they're getting letters from hundreds of investors. And then on top of that, they're also getting calls multiple times a day from brokers that want to list the properties for them. So we said, we don't want to look like that. So how do we get around that to really build that connection? On the last podcast, I talked about how there isn't really much distress in the self-storage space. It's more about really building rapport and kind of allowing the seller to see them handing off their baby to you. So we focused on how do we build that rapport. What we started doing is going to the state association. So the Self-Storage Association has state events around the year. And what we'll do is we'll pull, let's say, a list of the top 10 fastest growing cities in the state that we're targeting, usually 2 to 3 months before that SSA event occurs. Then we'll call them, cold call, and say, hey, it's not do you want to sell us your property? It's, I saw that the North Carolina SSA is coming up, or the Illinois, the Great Lakes SSA just happened a couple weeks ago. Would love to, buy a coffee and chat and see what's going on in your business. And then if they are going to the SSA, we'll meet them there. But every time after the call, we actually write a thank you letter to them. Thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it. If you need anything, here's my information. So first call has nothing to do with us wanting to buy their facility, or so they think. And then when we go to the SSA, we do kind of the breaking bread, meet and greet. And then afterwards, we always try to lead with contribution, saying, do you need any help? Do you need referrals to property management companies if you're looking to retire? Insurance agents, I noticed that maybe your property taxes are a little high. Do you need a referral to somebody that does property tax contesting? And from that point on, then we'll kind of just slip it in. We'll say, hey, is it cool if we just keep in touch with you every 3 to 6 months, see what you're doing? And then anytime we say, hey, if you're ever looking to sell, we'd love to be kind of the first ones at the plate. And because we led with contribution, we're always usually their first call, not the guy that's just spamming them with fake handwritten letters every 3 weeks. So that was the way that we were able to scale up the marketing side of just getting access to those sellers.
That sounds like a slow game, and a lot of people don't like slow games. Like,
Right.
what type of patience you have to demonstrate?
Yes. I mean, some of our best deals, it took us 4 years from the day that we contacted the seller the first time to the day that we closed on a property. So it is a much slower game. And the reason why is just because these transactions are much larger. So unlike when I was doing, wholesaling where, minimum, if I'm not doing 70 transactions a year, I'm losing money. This, I only need to do a couple transactions a year, way less stress, and the profitability has an extra 1 or 2 zeros behind it, right? So the slow game is worth it. And then when you also get to them to the ability to submit an offer, then you also have to be creative on your offer. So it's not just here's a cash offer. We usually submit 5 offers all at once, and then instead of it saying yes or no, they have to say which one of these offers do I want.
You said you look at these top cities and states you're targeting. How do you determine what states you're targeting?
Yeah, so we're going to target all 50 states. So the amount of self-storage in the United States is around 70, 72, 73,000 facilities. So there's not a lot.
Wait. How many? It's a good number. How many is in the whole country?
Like 72 to 73,000 facilities in the entire United States.
That's not a lot for how many people are in the United States, right? Like that's disproportional.
Right. So, it's unlike when I was doing residential here in Chicago, I would have mailing lists that were 100,000 just for a city.
Yeah.
Just to, and this is for the entire nation is 72,000.
But that's great though, because it's like your audience is so much narrowed down, and you could take time to be more rapport building. Where it's like you start 100,000 people in April, you don't know where the hell to start. Like,
right.
That's great.
And then not only that, but when I was doing residential or habitation based real estate, one of our main metrics that we would track was what was our cost per mailer, cost per lead. In self storage, it doesn't matter. Because, I'll spend, instead of, I think before I was spending something like a couple $100 cost per lead total for residential. And now I'll spend thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, knowing that if I can get a deal that's large enough, the profit could be in the millions range. So $10,000 for a lead acquisition is not a lot.
It's not. So you guys are tracking that number of like, I spent this much last year. We got 2 deals and your CAC or whatever. So, okay. That's interesting.
Yep. Before we jump into scaling the operations and so forth, you mentioned in the last podcast, just like the feasibility study of, I think that's very important because it's something we're not used to here. It's just, we're never worried about in the residential space, like, they're going to build this 50 unit right next, like there's just not a lot to do, where self-storage is the exact opposite, right? So can you talk to our listeners a little about, who are not familiar with self-storage, about that?
Yeah. So, obviously we always have our internal underwriting. We have 3 levels of underwriting. First is kind of like the back of the napkin, where I can run it within, a couple minutes. I can see if it's worth exploring and send it to the next level. The next level we send to our underwriting team. It usually takes them about 1 to 2 days. And then the third level is what we have to put together, like a full package when we're going to a lender. Once that full package is done, we already, each time we go from one level to the next, we're willing to spend more money. So by the time we're getting to that third level, I'm already spending $10,000, $15,000 on underwriting. But then, the lenders are going to say, well, of course you think this deal is going to be good because you're inside the deal. You have these, rosy colored glasses. We want to see somebody that is independent. You have to pay them before you receive the results so that they're truly unbiased. And so that's when we'll go and hire a third-party feasibility consultant. These are usually people that have been in the industry for 30 plus years. They have done every part of the self-storage game, from, call center operations, property management, sales, the whole thing. And you usually pay them anywhere between $8,000 to $16,000. They take 3 to 6 weeks to get the report back, and it's a huge report. It's something like 150 to 250 pages, and that's everything under the sun. Who are all the competitors? What are they charging? How occupied are they? What are the amenities that they charge at each location? They look at
Sounds like it's worth the info just regardless.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's
but that's
it's like CoStar, right? It's just,
right. But that's one of those things where you don't want to do it on every deal that comes into the hopper until it's worth your time to proceed. So
In CoStar, you got to pay monthly.
yeah,
That's where they get you.
yeah. So and then one of the biggest things is in the feasibility studies is also looking at the pipeline. So not only will they see anything that's currently in construction, but then they'll also see any deals in your trade area that have already been granted a construction permit. And then they'll even call the building departments and go one step before and says, has anyone talked to you about potentially applying for a building permit for self-storage or a site permit for self-storage? And so that gives us a lot of insight because, as an operator, we're probably number now of 96, 95 largest self-storage operator in the United States. But you have, we're totally tons of orders of magnitude below, say, like the REITs. So Public Storage, who has literally billions of dollars, can come in and put up a 100,000 square foot facility right next to yours and eat your lunch, basically. So the question is, can I get in? Can I build something? And in that time, build something before anybody else can open something up near me or eat some of the pent-up demand in that market. So that's what those feasibility studies are great for.
So the big companies, though, how... a lot of times these bigger companies are slower to move or slow to react. Like, how big are the self-storages of the world?
How big are what?
How big are they? Like, how fast? How big? Let me rephrase that. How big are they, and are they actually really effectively big, or they move slow because of it? And you're able to take advantage of that as a smaller operator.
Yeah, no, they're huge. So the top 6, or I guess now top 5, because one of them bought the other one. The top 5 publicly traded REITs, they own between 20 and 24% of the entire self-storage market. Then the next 100 operators, which I'm a part of, we own probably 9 to 10%.
That's it?
Yeah.
And then mom and pops.
And then the rest,
Jeez.
like 65 to 70%, are all just mom and pop operators that own 2 or fewer facilities.
But that's great. That whole blue ocean of that's why you're probably jazzed about this.
Right. So the name of the game right now is consolidation. So these mom and pop deals are too small for the big guys to take down one by one. So what do? I come in, I buy 10 to 15 of these mom and pops. I turn them around, put in professional management, a total tech stack, do CapEx improvements, even sometimes expand or double the size of the facility. Then I put them into portfolios of 10 to 15 properties and sell them all as one portfolio to the big guys, because they would never do the individual ones themselves, but they'll buy a portfolio that's ready to go.
You mentioned, like, how many underwriters do you have? Like, what is the team? I guess let's start there.
Yeah, so we were scaling up the team the last time I talked to you guys, and recently we have been using a lot of technology to kind of scale down the team and become much more lean. So one of the things you always got to look at in business is the difference between fixed cost and variable cost. Fixed cost is something that you have to pay regardless of if you have deals coming in or not, versus variable cost is something that you could turn on or turn off based on the deal flow. So payroll is a fixed cost. Regardless, every 2 weeks, you're going to have to send out a payroll check, right? And our payroll is getting really large when we were last on the podcast together. And what ended up happening right after that podcast is we sold off a large portfolio. I think it was like 10 or 12 properties all at once. And we ended up deciding to fire an entire operations staff. So we took operations out of in-house and we actually moved it to third-party professional operator. So now we turn that fixed cost into a variable cost. So that was probably, 12 to 18 people that we shed. Now, if you were to look at how much we have in operations that are third party, not our employees, we're probably at 60 to 70 employees on that side. But again, we're not paying them. It's the third parties that are paying them. On the sales side, we have one of the owners, Steven, and then our acquisition manager, Ed. So he does a lot of the kind of after underwriting. He's making the offers, he's doing the creative financing, figuring out ways to get these deals that no one else can, allowing us to pay more than our competitors can pay, but still make more profit than they are able to make. And then when you go to the underwriting level, we have utilized a lot of artificial intelligence. So now when you, in the past, needed a transaction coordinator just to put together all the data and the documents and all the rent rolls, et cetera, we can offload a lot of that onto technology. And then we have 3 main underwriters that will take all that, create our, Excel underwriting sheets, send them to Ed and Steven to make sure that they're good to go before we make an offer. So we're super lean. Right now at the executive level, we're probably at 12 people. And then everything else is on the operations side, which we pushed off to the third-party managers.
Yeah, pushing that off too, is that the main reason you've been able to get into every state, right? Like you buy
Right.
something in a state you've never been, you got to spin up a team that seems
Right. And that, what we realize is it doesn't really make sense. And Mark, I'm sure to spin up your own property management company, you need a certain volume of things to manage within a certain location to make it make sense to have a regional manager and a general manager, things like that. So for us, we would have to be holding probably 50 to 55 facilities, Class A style, larger facilities, for it to really make sense for us to spin up a property management company again. So we offloaded all of that over the last probably 3 to 4 years.
How does the self-storage property management world work? Like, do you have one national provider that's provided for you, or do you have to go to each different state with different PM or property managers?
Yeah, so there's the top 50 operators in the country that we always look at. Some of them are nationwide, and some of them are more regionally focused. Midwest, South, Southeast, et cetera.
Are some of them technically competitors too?
Oh yeah,
If they're doing
They're
third
all
party.
competitors.
Yeah.
So most of the people that do property management, they also have corporate-owned stores themselves. So that's kind of one of the games that you have to play when you're trying to select a third-party manager for an individual project. And the interesting thing is when you're going to some of these guys, like you said, is do I just have one? The answer is no. Everything in our business I learned very early on, we need redundancy. So we always have 3 to 5 vendors per vendor role that we need. If it's, construction management, general contracting, third-party management, property tax review, we always have 3 to 5 different vendors, because if one starts to get a little too cute and starts charging us more and more and more and it's not competitive with the market, we say, listen, a third of the portfolio is somebody else. Do you really want to lose your third? So, give us something that makes sense. And the same thing goes with the third-party managers. So, but not only that, the third-party manager vendor side also has these kind of other factors that you have to take into account. So, for example, do they have a corporate-owned store inside of the trade area that, they may pull leads away from my facility to send to their corporate-owned stores? Is the answer yes or no? Do they have other third-party managed facilities, so they don't own it, but they're managing for somebody else in my trade area? So I'm typically trying to find a third-party manager that is high quality. The banks are going to love them, the investors are going to love them, but they also don't have any type of conflicts of interest inside of that one market.
All right. You mentioned creative financing. I believe with self-storage, you could use SBA loans. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. So talk to us we don't know anything about this world. What are some of the ways you can get deals done? Like, you get a deal that's under contract, it looks like it's going to perform. What are some of the ways that this gets financed?
Yeah. Let's start from kind of the more traditional and move towards the more creative. So first off, the banks are going to usually be your best, local banks, community banks are going to be your best and easiest way to go in the beginning. So those are going to be, typically nowadays 65 to 75% leverage. You're paying rates in the 7 to 9%, 1 point, and these are going to be usually 5-year term on a 20 to 25-year balloon.
Okay.
So that's a lot of cash you have to outlay up front, 35% down payment. The other thing with banks right now is that they're really hurting from a deposit level. So not only are they saying, hey, you got to bring 35% down, but then we also want you to bring 5 to 10% in deposits that you put into a CD for the life of the loan.
Well, the other thing too is if you're at 8% on a 20-year AM, like, do you have DSCR issues like we do in the multi-space, right? Like,
So-
that sounds...
Yeah, so that's usually why the leverage is a lot lower now, because it's not a thing about, I can give you 75 or I can give you 70. It's what leverage can I give you based on a 1.25 debt cover ratio in, depending on the bank, 24 months after closing, 36 months, or 48 months after closing. So that large down payment can be pretty tough for newer investors getting into the space. So then you can go to Small Business Administration financing, SBA financing. The SBA, the whole reason it was created and spun up was to help small businesses gain traction. So on these loans, you can get up to 90% leverage, and there's kind of 2 options that you can use. You can use what's called a 7A loan, which has a $5 million maximum. And with the 7A loan, it's basically the bank is giving you the loan, And then they have some securities on the back end from the government. And then you also have a SBA 504 loan, which is a much larger loan amount. It can be technically unlimited, but self-storage doesn't get that large. And with that one, there's actually 2 or 3 different stakeholders. So the bank makes a portion of the loan. Then there is a guarantee portion that comes from the CDC or the CTC. And then you also have a separate body at the SBA that will also give you approval or not approval. So that's a lot harder to get because you have to go through 3 different levels of approval as opposed to just having a bank approval on the front end. The difference though is you get fixed rate debt for 25 years, fully amortized. So there's no balloon, which is nice, but that also comes with very high prepayment penalties. So 504 is more if you're looking to hold something
you're locking
long-term.
in.
Yeah, which is not our business model, right? So the nice thing about inside of SBA is they allow for some creative financing. So they will allow the seller to take a second position. They'll also allow the seller to give you some equity to go towards your down payment. So typically what I tell people is if you're not having any seller participation, just assume you're probably going to get about 85% leverage from the SBA. If you have seller participation in 1 or 2 of those different categories, straight seller finance debt or seller finance equity, you can get all the way down to 5% down payment, 95% leverage. So that comes, obviously, it's kind of like in the residential world, it's kind of like getting an FHA loan. It's a nightmare, super document heavy. Sometimes they're going to ask to put a silent second on your primary residence. So, and usually they only allow this to if it's kind of like your first loan or you have all of your portfolio is basically stabilized or cash flowing. I don't qualify for SBA financing anymore, not only because I have too much cash, but then all of the deals I'm doing are value add or ground up development. So at any given time, my global cash flows are negative. If you look at all of my deals together, the NOI is going to be less than the debt servicing on all of them, right? Or on a majority of them.
Yep. And just to break that down for our listeners, because you're doing a rehab, you're going through this, like those 3 or 4 properties are giving you nothing or minimal or whatever it is.
Yeah. So for example, I'm building a deal outside of Atlanta.
This is how I live my life, by the way.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
like-
Well, it's because this is kind of how you produce. This is how you force appreciation. This is how you get those 2x multiples on your money in 3 to 5 years, versus just clipping coupons at 6% by buying a stabilized self-storage facility. So it just doesn't make sense for us that are trying to accumulate wealth as opposed to preserve wealth, right? So if that's kind of your situation like it is mine, then SBA is kind of out the door. And then now you start going into the more creative style financing. So you can do things where when we make an offer, we make a cash offer, and then we have 4 separate seller finance structured offers that go along with that cash offer. One of them will be, let's say we can't get to the price that the seller wants. We'll say, hey, carry a silent seller second that is unrecorded, that is for a small percentage, maybe 10% of the purchase amount or 15% of the purchase amount. Then we can go to a seller finance structure where the seller is the majority of the purchase amount. So they're carrying 65 to 90%. So they're basically the first position bank, if you want. Then we'll do deals where it's kind of split 50-50. So this is what, if a seller wants a large down payment that doesn't make sense for us for them to be in the first, like, hey, I want 50% down. Most people that are structuring seller finance will say, well, that doesn't work. And it says, well, it can work, but you're going to have to hold that as a second behind the first position bank. So I'm willing to give you a price that's higher than the cash market, but you're going to have to allow a bank to come in front of you so that I can get a construction loan or a turnaround loan. So maybe the bank comes in with anywhere between 35 to 50%. The seller comes in with anywhere between 35 to 50%, and then I come in with the remainder. Me and my investors come in with the remainder. And then the last one is a very interesting structure. It's called a master lease agreement. So it's basically a lease with purchase option that you do on residential, but just for commercial level. So instead of me buying your self-storage facility, I'm going to rent the entire self-storage facility from you for a fixed monthly payment. And it's going to come with a purchase option that I can execute unilaterally over the next 3 to 5 years. So I say, I'm going to run it. And then eventually when I say it's time to make money on this, I'll find a buyer. And in the morning, I'll execute my option. And then I'll sell that facility to the buyer in the afternoon. So it's almost like a double close. Yeah. So that's usually an option that we'll use where, the previous 3 options didn't make sense to them. And they want a price that's too high for us. And I say, listen, your property isn't worth the purchase price you want. But if you give me 3 to 5 years to raise the value of your facility, then I can pay this price.
How and then how are you're turning around and flipping it for a higher price than that? You're banking on like, all right, they want 10 million in 3, it's worth 8 today, but you know you can get it to 12
Right.
on a 5-year runway.
Right.
Okay.
And then I know that anytime during that 5 years, if I get a buyer in hand for 12, I have control. I'm operating the facility, and the way that the lease option is structured for tax purposes, I'm also the owner. So I get to pull all the bonus depreciation, which our buddy Kev recently came on the podcast. Bonus depreciation is back up to 100%. So it's a huge strategy now. And these are things that sellers usually don't know about. The mom and pop guys don't really know about. So we come in and we say, okay, I'm going to lease this facility for, let's say, $800,000 a year. I know that it produces, my net profit on that facility is 1.2. I make the spread, $400,000 spread of cash flow for my investors each year. And then when, let's say I have a purchase option on it at 10 million, but I'm able to sell that facility for 12 million, I will execute my $10 million purchase option and then sell it for 12 on the same day.
I'm putting myself in their shoes, and the benefit to them is they're still going to get close to what they were getting without having to raise a finger, right? The old, like, I want to be done with this.
Right.
They're still getting the money coming in without having to do it. And then they know that they could get their number.
Yeah. And then
it's out there for them.
Not only that, but typically when we structure these master lease agreements, there is a contractually required CapEx expenditure. So not only do they, and usually these are the mom and pops that are behind the desk themselves. So like they are the manager, right? So they get slightly less than what they were getting before, but without having to work at all. So they're still getting cash flow, which self-storage owners love. And they want me to default because then they keep my lease option fee. They get all those monthly payments, and they get a facility back that's worth more than when they
this
leased it
is
to me.
much more protective than like seller financing, right? Like if I'm the person selling on the other end of the table, like there's a lot. I feel way more protected the way you laid this out than seller financing, right?
Exactly. So it's way more protection for the seller.
Now, I follow this, but like if you sat down with like, I don't know, anyone who's not in the game, like a mom and pop, and put these 5 options, like how do you not overwhelm them? Like talk like this sounds like
right. So the key is
we probably lost some listeners in the last 5 minutes, right? Like,
So here's how I do it. You got to talk in using their words and their types of terms, right? So if when we're sitting down and I realize now that the cash price is not what they want, and they're willing to do something creative with me, I don't say, hey, are you willing to do a master lease option with purchase and a 5-year or whatever? I say, what's important to you? And then they say, I want to make $3,000 a month, and this is my price. I say, okay, I will structure something. Connect me with your attorney. I'll have our attorneys talk, so then it's out of our hands. But we will immortalize that you want $3,000 a month, and this is the price that you want in the next 3 to 5 years. That's all I say.
Oh my gosh!
And then the rest is just attorneys making sure that it all makes sense. Same thing with like the regular seller financing stuff. Usually, I'm not telling them what the interest rate is and all that stuff up front. They're just saying, this is what I want in payments each month, and this is the price I want. And I say, I can do that. Here's how I'm going to have to structure it, and I'll send it to your attorney. But make sure that you know that this is what you're getting per month, and here's the price that you'll get at the end of 3 to 5 years. And then the rest is just paperwork, right? And they don't need to worry about that.
I'm getting so much energy from you right now with the energy you're giving off because this excites you. Like, this clearly excites you and it gets you amped up in negotiating these deals. It's so awesome to hear how much of an expert you are in this field.
Well, and it's funny because it's not, this isn't me. What's that quote with Isaac Newton? It's, I see farther because I stand on the shoulders of giants. So I was not a very good seller finance guy, back in the day, but I went out and decided to get educated. So I got a buddy that teaches all notes and seller finance structure. His name is Eddie Speed. He has a great course that I took.
And a great name, Eddie Speed.
Eddie Speed. He's got a great personality too. You should, if you ever meet him, you'll see what I'm saying. He's a great personality, lights up a room. So he taught me, he's been buying and selling notes and creative structured notes for like 40 years. So he invited me to go to one of his classes in San Francisco for free. It was like a 3-day weekend. And I came out with like a ton of information that I sent over to my acquisitions guys. And then same thing, Mike Jake is another guy on the residential side that teaches how to do seller financing. So he does a lot of like lease options and subject to and stuff like that. So all this stuff you could do with self-storage as well. Any real estate. As long as you have willing participants that are willing to get a little creative. And, I was the kind of one of the pitches I always say is, I'm going to have to pay a lot of interest to this bank. Would you just like to receive all this interest income instead?
Brilliant.
And they're like, I didn't know that was an option. I said, of course it's an option. Everything's an option. We can, whatever you want. And you can structure it in ways that get extremely creative. So the biggest thing is when you're doing a cash transaction, you're trying to go through that transaction as fast as possible. Trying to get that thing signed, get due diligence done, and then close as fast as possible. It's the opposite when you go into creative structuring. You want to slow that conversation down, or as Eddie Speed says, that talk off. You want to slow it down. You want to have multiple meetings, and you want to uncover what truly is motivating them to sell. So, for example, we had a seller that he wanted to sell his facility because he wanted to pay for his granddaughter's or grandson's college tuition. I said, well, if that's the case, like how much does she need each year, and when are those payments due? What if we structure our seller finance payments that a month before the tuition is due, you just send me the tuition bill, and then we pay that tuition bill for you, and that goes against the principle that we owe you on the self-storage facility. And they're like, I didn't know that was an option. I said, everything is an option. I just need to know why you're selling. What is your motivation for selling? We can structure something that is beneficial. It's a win-win-win. It's a win for you. It's a win for us. It's a win for the facility.
But it sounds like you've put so many reps in, and you've had it's all about the approach. 'Cause I feel when you're a real estate investor, there's a fine line between seeming shady and being like very resourceful and creative.
Right.
So it sounds like you've mastered that.
Yeah, and I'm an engineer by training, so one of the things I had to kind of de-learn was how to. I always wanted everything to fit inside of a spreadsheet. I wanted to plug some numbers in, and that spreadsheet sends out the offers that I'm able to do. But when it comes to seller financing, you can't do that. You really have to listen to what they want and structure a deal that gets all of their goals done that also allows you to profit.
Yep. All right, let's talk about the actual turnaround of of a facility. So you mentioned like putting a tech stack. Like a lot of us are not familiar with self-storage. So you walk into facilities, what are some of the things that a typical owner might not be maximizing that you would come in and do to bring up the value?
So it's still some of the stuff that I talked about on the old podcast. We'll cover it real quick. Raising income by raising rents, charging fees that are not being charged. When a seller's sitting behind the desk and he's the one that becomes friends with his tenants, they're a couple days late, they're a month late. He's not going to give them flack, right? Whatever your rate was, Mark, when you rented 10 years ago, that's probably what your rate is today. That's not how the world works anymore, especially after the massive inflation that we experienced post-COVID with all that money printing, right? And then the other piece is dropping expenses. So why do you have a $500 a month phone and internet package when we can get this done with a cell phone with $30 a month, right? There's no need to have a physical phone. Why are you paying 2 full-time employees? Oh, because, you wanted to help them out. Great. Business isn't a charity. You should use the profits of your business to help support charities, but the business itself should not be a charity, right? So we can probably run that facility with half of a full-time person or 1 full-time person, depending on the size of the facility. And then now with these advancements of AI, we have some technologies that are not only reducing the amount of staff we have, but raising our profitability substantially. So for example, there's one product we use called Veritech. Veritech has 3 main functions. The first function is it will look at every one of your tenants that you have in your facility, and it'll score them 1 to 10 based on how likely they are to absorb a rent increase. And it'll use everything from what you have personally, like are they paying with a credit card or are they paying with cash? Is their credit card a prepaid credit card, or is it an Amex Platinum with no limit, right? Obviously, the guy with the Amex Platinum with no limit probably doesn't care if his rent goes up $25 a month, right? The guy that's paying cash is always late, always 3 to 5 days late. That guy's probably not going to be very good at absorbing a rent increase. Then it will also scour the internet for anything that is publicly available. So say, for example, you are posting on your social media sites that are open that you're just got out of the hospital. Probably not the guy to raise the rent on, right? Or you look at Fernando's social media and you see that he's in Rio de Janeiro during Carnival. Maybe he's a good candidate to raise rents on, right? He's not really looking at his bill. So that's the first function that AI does. The second function is that it checks all of the competing properties around you every 5 minutes to see what their rates are. and will dynamically price your rate compared to what they are. Also, how many keyword functions are being searched in Google. So for example, you have a facility in, let's say, Roselle, and all of a sudden you see over a couple minute period, Roselle self-storage or self-storage in Roselle spikes in keyword searches. That Veritex software is going to capture that and then raise rents during that period while it's going up. And then the last function is this, which I think is hysterical, is this function of good, better, best. To me, I'm a nomad. I don't have basically any possessions. Using self-storage to me is wild. I don't understand the concept. That being said, I understand that other people use self-storage. In the United States, after COVID, 1 in every 9 people use self-storage.
Wow.
It's an insane statistic. So this good, better, best is, let's say you have a street rate or a web rate that says this 10 by 10 is $80 a month. You come in, you say, I'd like the $80 a month units. And they say, okay, well, the $80 a month unit, you have to go to the 3rd floor, take the elevator, and then it's all the way in the back corner. If you want a unit that's next to the elevator on the 3rd floor, that's actually $90 a month. But if you want one that's on the 1st floor right next to the office when you walk in, that one's $110. So do you want the good, the better, or the best? And we get something like 40% upsell from people not wanting to take the unit all the way back at the end. To me, it's wild because it's all the same thing. It's a metal box on a concrete slab that you're going to see maybe once a year.
People pay for convenience, though. I love it.
That's right. So just installing this Veritex software across our facilities and not doing any change whatsoever, we're able usually to increase NOI by 16 to 30% just by using this one AI.
And these are on big
software.
Numbers.
Yes.
Right? Like this is not like a 3-unit building. Like
no, this is like, 1,000-unit self-storage facility that is bringing in $1.2 million a year in net operating income.
Yeah. Like,
how many, what's average like for the industry of how size wise, or maybe just your portfolio?
Good question. So on the previous podcast, we talked about these different generations of self-storage, right? You have like the Class A stuff, which is the multi-story. Those multi-story builds, I'm typically building between 80 to 90,000 square feet. So that's on average, you can assume about 100 square feet per unit. So 800 to 900 units.
Wow, there's 800, 900 units in those 3-story buildings?
Yes.
Wow.
And then, on the kind of Class B stuff, which is your mix of climate control and non-climate control, usually the facility's single story. That stuff's going to be closer to 110, 120 square feet per average size unit. And then on the stuff that's like all drive up, super rural, then you can start getting into really high numbers where it's like 120, 130, 140 square feet per facility. So then the number of, or the per unit. So then the number of units per facility starts dropping. Those Class Bs are typically in that 50 to 60,000 square foot range. And then the Class C, kind of the new mom and pop stuff that we buy to then expand, is in that 35 to 40,000 square feet.
Do you own or have you done any deals with like the old Kmart's that converted to?
Yeah.
Like how is it? I see that it's popping up. It's becoming
It's a great business, especially after COVID. Because when COVID happened, a lot of the
Kmart is.
yeah.
Keep going. Sorry.
Lance has no idea,
Circuit
right?
City, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Venture, baby.
Yeah,
Why
I
didn't
was
they
just
team
saying,
up?
I was just saying, I thought you were gonna make fun of me for that one.
So this strategy is fantastic because think about where these big box retail stores are located. They're on major thoroughfares, surrounded by dense residential in affluent areas where people have disposable income to spend on shopping malls and shopping, right? So these types of deals are fantastic if you can get them at the right price. So for example, in Ohio near Columbus, I bought a 110,000 square foot Sears building for $9 a foot.
Wow.
And then I put in another $50 or so a foot and turned it into a almost 70,000 square foot self-storage facility. And it's right on like Main and Main, right? So great deal. There's another one that I did in Texas, which was an old Walmart. And what people don't realize about Walmart's strategy is what they'll typically do is they'll build like a regular Walmart on one side of town and then another Walmart on the other side of town. And if they see they have enough demand, they'll shut down both. And in the middle of those two, they'll build a super Walmart. So what do they do with those buildings? They sell them to people like me. So I just bought one of those. I turned it into a 55,000 square foot facility. And then on the parking lot, I built another 55,000 square foot building. So that is now 110,000 square foot self-storage facility.
At some point, like, do you see like the absorption rate of like, all right, people have figured this out, like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, where, hey, we have enough self-storage? Because it sounds like we're nowhere near that.
Yeah, we're nowhere near it. And the biggest thing is that self-storage is a hyper-localized business. So, You can't say, are we saturated in the country, the state? You can't even say it for the city. I'm pulling probably 65 to 70% of my tenant base from a 5 to 15 minute drive time from my facility. Because just think about it, put yourself in the customer's shoes. You typically want something that's easy and convenient. So that usually means that it has to be on your way from work or home. And it's something that you can stop in real quick before you have to pick up the kids and drop them off at whatever, practice. So they're not going to go drive to, if you live in Roselle, you're not going to drive to Mokina to go find a self-storage facility that's $5 cheaper a month. You're just not going to do that, right? You're not going to drive an hour and a half. You're going to drive 5 to 10 minutes from wherever you are stopped or leaving from. So that's the question is this trade area that I'm looking at saturated? And because we have all these net inflows and outflows from cities and populations, there's always going to be new markets that are popping up. So what did we see during COVID? We saw a lot of people leaving California, Chicago, New York, starting to go to the Southeast, right? Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and then in the South as well, Texas. But then now we're starting to see is a lot of these markets, we're starting to see a net migration coming back, especially to Chicago, because a lot of these markets, they're having massive problems with climate change, right? North Carolina flooding, hurricanes in Florida, not to mention like that whole issue that's happening with the Florida condo market right now. So people are leaving those markets, coming back. So every time there's these net flows of people, new areas start building. So basically anywhere that Lennar and D.R. Horton and all these large home builders are building, that's going to be a new market to build a self-storage facility.
Yeah.
Is there any on like the old inventory? Does that ever go away? Like they might tear down an old office building, they might tear down an old industrial building, build a new one. Is there ever any of that?
Yeah, I've seen it a few times. Really, the stuff that you're tearing down is kind of these Class D facilities, which they're built out of CMU or cement block, and they have asphalt shingle roofing. These things suck, especially anywhere they have a freeze-thaw cycle. So like in Chicago, because every time it freezes and thaws, water gets into that crack, breaks it more. And eventually the maintenance to repair those cracks on those masonry bricks just doesn't make sense. They say, you know what, just tear it down. We'll use the old concrete pad, and then we'll put up corrugated steel wall and roof. Right?
So they get reinvented. So one more question on the retail. I started asking that as sort of a joke, but a lot of the cities doing commercial real estate, a lot of cities, special use permit, they used to want it tucked away, especially when it was outside.
Right.
What's their temperature as far as taking a Walmart, putting it in there? And they get taxes from this, right? As a city?
Exactly. So it's depending on the municipality, it can be either easy to work with or extremely difficult to work with. So for example, working with Cook County, really tough. They want self-storage to kind of be tucked away in industrial sections of the zoning areas. But that's not where our customers are, because municipalities, the ones that aren't, enlightened, they think that self-storage is an industrial use. It's not. It's a retail use. You have customers coming in and out every day. So you want to put those things somewhere where it's easy for your customers to get to them. Think of like, where do you put Chipotle's? Where do you put McDonald's? Where do you put Walmart's? That's where we want to be, right? So it is difficult. And so there's a couple strategies we can have to deal with a tough municipality. So the first is, obviously if we're going to get something that is kind of defunct and not really producing, we say, hey, you're maybe getting property taxes. Maybe the property taxes are in arrears. How would you like to, give us a special use permit or rezone this for us so that we could put something that's going to be paying $80,000 to $100,000, $150,000 a year in property taxes, right? So that's usually the first strategy. Then there's some other strategies that people use as well that I don't do, but other people do as well. So you think about it. What do the municipalities sell, right? So if you're in a municipality that collects sales tax on self-storage, which is not many, that's one. Another thing that they like to sell is water. So what can you do? If you're trying to get a self-storage project approved, you can say, hey, I'm going to put up a car wash or a laundromat right next to the self-storage project. It's all in the same lot. So I'm only going to put that up if you approve the self-storage facility as well. And then now you're spending tens of thousands of dollars a day on water that you're buying directly from the municipality. So there are ways to get around that. And then the other thing is also kind of what they think self-storage is. A lot of people in zoning departments, especially if they've been there for a long time, they think self-storage is these gravel aisles with like these shitty looking buildings that are dark and not lit. And then we really have to, we'll show up to these zoning meetings with these giant like 4x4 cutouts that show like, look at what our facility looks like. It looks like a office building. It has beautiful glass and patterns on the outside and textures and all this other stuff. So there's kind of different things that you can do to get past municipalities. And unfortunately, this is kind of what I deal with all the time because I don't want to build in a municipality that's easy to build in or rezone in.
Yeah.
Because that means that it's easy for my competitors to come in and also build and rezone. So that Atlanta project that I'm doing right now, it's like a over $14 million build, almost 90,000 square feet. That one, it took us 3 years to get rezoning and permit approval. And I had to do a bunch of stuff that, you know, cities right now, after COVID, they're basically running out of money. They have no money now. So they're trying to figure out ways that they can get you to do things that they are required to do, like put in sidewalks and improve infrastructure, sewer infrastructure. So, for example, that Atlanta project, I had to drill underneath the entire highway to connect to the sewer because they accidentally thought it was on the other side. That's what they told us. They said, well, you know, we made a mistake, but you still have to pay for it. We're not going to pay for the extension to come over here based on what we gave you on our plans, which I thought was ridiculous. But I said, you know, it's fine. And they said, oh, but we also, you know, Georgia Department of Transportation doesn't want to pay for a deceleration lane. So you have to pay for the deceleration lane. I said, okay, I will do that. So now I know the second I break ground on that deal, I'm 3 years ahead of any competitor coming into my market.
Yeah.
Right? There's no way they're going to beat me to the market.
Yeah. In your ideal world, what type of deal would make the most sense for you? Whether it be building new, taking a retail spot, or like an old mom and pop and doing a traditional value add? Like, what is like Fernando's like, ooh, this is where my bread and butter I like to play?
Yeah, so I'll break this into kind of two pieces. So I'll give you what my investors are ideal for them and what's ideal for me. So for my investors, what I've found recently is a lot of people are focusing on cash flow. They don't want to take the 2 to 3 years to start seeing distributions. I think it's all the uncertainty that's in the market right now with banks and the executive and everything that's going on, tariffs, et cetera. So a lot of people just want stuff that produce cash flow right away. Unfortunately, deals that produce cash flow right away, they sell for a higher premium because everybody wants that. So that's tough to get. If you are an investor that is willing to be a little bit risk tolerant, then ground up construction is the best bet. So how do we match these two seemingly opposite goals into one package? So now what we're starting to do is phased in construction. So let's say I'm going to build a 80,000 square foot facility. Instead of building it all in one go, a multi-story facility on a 4 to 6 acre lot, I'm going to build it on a 10 to 12 acre lot in phases. So what I'm able to do is I'm going to, and banks love this because then it's instead of having to wait 48 months to get to 1.25 debt service, I can get to it in 12 to 18. I build the first phase, 40,000 square feet. I bring in a couple investors. So instead of me having to raise $5 million on that deal, let's say I only have to raise $1 million, and then I put $1 million in my own cash. Then once that first phase of 40,000 square feet is about, call it 8 to 12 months away from being stabilized, then I go back to the original bank. I say, look at how good I did. Let's reappraise this sucker. Let's see how much equity I have in it. And then let's use that newfound equity to build the next 20,000 square foot phase. So now there's way less risk to the bank. There's way less risk to the investors.
And real quick, just sorry to cut you off, but at that point, if you don't have the equity, it's kind of no harm, no foul. You just can't keep going.
Right.
Like the bank is still, everyone's still fine and made whole. You just cannot continue to scale.
Right.
But,
and so this is why I split it into a 3-phase build. So the first phase is always the biggest phase, 40,000. And then I do a phase 2 that's 20,000, another phase 3 that's 20,000. So when you go to the bank and you look at these deals, the equity is there. Typically when I'm building these things, I'm doubling the value of my build cost the second it gets built. So once I have certificate of occupancy, I'm already double the value. And then from a bank perspective, I usually get to about 50% loan to value within it being at 60 to 80% occupancy. So that's why we say once we're at around 12 months, 60 to 80% occupancy, I go to the bank and I say, listen, this thing's chugging along. I'm going to run out of space soon. It's going to take me 8 to 12 months to build the next phase. So I need to start building now because by the time this one's ready to open, this one's just running out of available units, right? And because I'm using the equity from a 40,000 square foot facility to build an extra 20, it's usually all the equity's there already. I don't need to, and if I need to raise some extra, I'll just put some of my own cash in, right?
Man. So you're a smart dude. It's a lot of things we covered here where it's like, man, like this is really good stuff.
Yeah.
What the next 5 years, like what do you see? Like, are you gonna continue along the same acceleration?
Yeah, good question. So recently we had one of our 1-year planning meetings, following the traction model. And originally we wanted to get this up to about $1 billion company. And then we started looking at the way that we were choosing these goals and like, why do we want it to be $1 billion? Just because we want to build something that's $1 billion? How about we switch the way that we start looking at this business to serve us as the owners? So then we started changing our metrics to how many months do I want to travel per year? How much free cash flow do I have net of taxes each year? And so now we changed our entire 10-year, 3-year, 1-year, and 90-day rocks to focus more on how do we get to the point where Steven and I are owning facilities free and clear, no investors, no debt. So that is now the new plan, is to continue building. We're still going to be using a ton of investors probably for the next 10 years eventually, and then we're going to continue scaling our investment into those deals. So right now, anytime there's a deal, we're putting about 20% of the money in. Our investors are putting about 80%. The next milestone,
which is a big number, like a $10 million deal. Like you guys are putting serious cash in.
Right. Yeah. So eventually then we're going to try to scale this to 50-50, where we're putting in half of the money, the investors are putting in half the money. Then flip it to 80-20, where we're putting in 80%, investors are putting in 20%, until we get to the point where we no longer need to use investors to keep scaling, because the amount of cash flow that's coming out for us as the GP allows us to build another deal without having to go to investors. So that's the first couple phases. Then the final phase is, how do we get to the point where we're building deals and collecting cash flow where we no longer need to get bank debt? The problem with bank debt is there's all these rules and it's all hunky-dory, but as we saw during the great financial crisis, when times get tough, the banks are going to do things that may be illegal to try to get their money off the street. Look at the amount of illegal foreclosures that went down. Bank of America got hit massively. Chase got hit massively. So there's always inherent risk having a lending partner. Yes, you can't scale as fast without leverage, but that's not something. Right now I'm scaling with leverage and investors. But once I get a little bit older and I just want to kind of relax and simplify my life, I don't need to scale anymore. Then it goes from, the goal of being wealth accumulation to wealth preservation. And at that point, I just want to reduce all my risk as much as possible and own these things free and clear. Because like I said, a $10 million facility can produce anywhere between 1.2 to 1.5 million free cash flow a year. And that's all you need is a couple of those to live a pretty good life, right?
Yeah, it's great. We had some guests on recently, and they broke it down on the residential side, where it's a lot of people pick like, I want 100 doors, or I want to get to 1,000 doors, and it ends up being where it's like you probably just have to figure out how to buy 20 doors and pay it off right away.
Yes.
And that should give most people the lifestyle that they think they want,
right,
for the most part. And you just did it flip side. So I love the level of maturity that you're getting here as you're getting older and being more successful. So.
Yeah. Also, how many people don't even just plan? They just throw out that number, and there was no
hundreds.
There
round,
was no
billions round.
There's
Yeah.
no rhyme or reason. Just like, all right, I saw this on Bigger Pockets.
Yeah.
Right. So, man, anything else before we wrap here?
I got
good stuff.
That was good. Yeah. That time flew.
Do you think? I guess one last question. Someone here hears this, they're all jazzed up. They're newer. They don't have this huge track record. Can they get in the self-storage game? Like, how hard is it to enter? Because you can't just go back a 2-unit, right? Like,
right.
Commercial real estate, you can kind of scale into it.
Yeah, so it's pretty easy. And the nice thing is that, I'm talking big facilities because that's just where I'm at right now, but that's not where I started. Like I said on the previous podcast when I was here with you guys, the first facility I bought was in Yorkville. It was 16,000 square feet. It was $1 million facility, or just shy of $1 million purchase price. If you went to a SBA lender, you can control $1 million asset with $100,000 in cash. If you don't have $100,000 in cash, I bet just by going through your phone and calling everyone inside your first 3 circles, if you will, so family, friends, and then friends of friends and friends of family, you could probably find $100,000 to put together to buy a facility with investors. So it's not difficult. And that was a 16,000, 17,000 square foot facility. There's facilities out there that are 8,000, 9,000, 12,000. So there is a way to scale into self-storage. You're going to want to try to get out of those smaller facilities as fast as possible, because the smaller facility, the more you have to do, versus once you get to facilities that are producing on average, call it $50,000 a month in revenue, you don't need to do anything. You can hire, it has enough free cash flow that you can hire entire teams to do everything for you, and then you just collect the checks.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, ready to wrap?
Yep.
Let's do it.
All right. So what's your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do all this while so many other people just wish?
Yeah. So I think it's focusing on kind of bifurcating our company. We really have three companies. We have a marketing company, we have a self-storage company, and then we have an investor relations or investor-facing company. So once we realize that we can segregate our companies like this and focus on each one to have their own goals and grow, that allowed the company to go fast. So for example, if you don't have deals, you can't grow. So you need to have a good marketing engine to get those deals. Great. Now you have a marketing engine, but now you have too many deals that you can't close. How do you do that? Well, obviously one option is to wholesale. Wholesaling is great short term, not a great long-term strategy because it's extremely tax inefficient and you're giving away all the profit to your buyers, right? So what do you need to do? You start raising money from equity investors. So once you start learning on how to be a syndicator, how to put together private placement memorandums, then the sky is the limit. You can close every deal that comes into your pipeline that is a good deal for you as long as you can raise the equity for it. So I think that's the biggest thing. And I think the reason why I've been able to scale so fast is doing this. A part of our marketing strategy is going on podcasts, educating the market to dominate the market. And what ends up happening is, maybe I teach some of my competitors how to compete against me, but eventually, usually those guys or gals will find a deal that's too big for the britches, and they'll call Fernando and they say, hey, I got a deal. It's too big for me. I'll cut you in on the deal if you can do X, Y, Z for me on this deal. Maybe raise capital, maybe negotiate the debt, etc. Same thing on the capital raising side. Let's say you listen to all this, you're like, Fernando, this sounds awesome, but I just don't want to do it. I want to get access to self-storage investments, but I don't want to physically do it. Maybe I have a W-2. Maybe I run a different business that's not related. What if I just give you $100,000 to invest in your syndications? So that, I think, has been one of the best things for what we've done recently is this kind of multi-channel podcasting approach. And at the end of the podcast, a 1-hour podcast, we could usually cut into 500 to 700 different pieces of content. And then we syndicate it across all of the social media channels. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and then even some of the stuff that are lesser known like Reddit and WeChat and some of these other ones that get more investors, more sellers, more buyers.
It's tough. All right, what is the one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first investment property, whether it be residential, commercial, self-storage?
Just do it. There's so many people out there, myself included, when I started in real estate, that they have this analysis paralysis and they're waiting for like the best grand slam deal to come across their table. But honestly, the only way you're going to learn is to just do your first one and just assume you're going to break even on your first deal or maybe score like a first base hit. But that gets you in the game. Then you start seeing how things work. You start seeing the mistakes you made on your first acquisition, and then you can modify for those going forward.
Yep. What do you do for fun?
A lot.
Travel's on there.
Travel has been the biggest one. So I've been learning a lot of languages. I speak Portuguese, Spanish, and now I'm learning Italian. Learning the cultures that go along with these countries. And then, I love to read. I think that's one of the other things that gave me kind of a competitive advantage is I usually read 2 to 3 books a week. My Audible's insane. I think I have like 280 or 290 books on there. And I really enjoy it. And that's something that you can do while doing other things. You could be, clean up the house, walking around, on a flight, on a train. It doesn't matter. So those are kind of things that I love to do for fun. Video games. I also love to play video games when I have the time.
There you go. All right, this is a good segue. What's a good book, podcast, or self-development activity you'd recommend to the listeners?
Okay, so just on this trend of travel and building a life that allows you to do that, there's a great book called Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. I think the subtext is The Forgotten Art of Long-Term World Travel. I'd recommend reading that. It's a little bit different than most of my recommendations, which is business related, but this can help you spur building your business into a way that allows you to kind of accomplish the non-business goals you have in your life.
All right.
All right. Other than yourself, name a valuable resource for other Chicago real estate investors.
Cost Seg Kev.
There you go.
The reason I bring it up is, for example, that Atlanta deal that I'm doing right now, Kev just did a study for me. For every dollar my investors invest into that deal, they get 91 cents back in bonus appreciation. So it's almost like a free investment.
Wow.
How's it so high? That's insane.
Because we're building it from the ground up. And when we build it, we bring in one of these cost seg engineers to help us design it. So that pumps up our
green tape, dude.
Yeah.
green tape. Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't use the green tape in self-storage, but that's one of the things. And then you also got to realize leverage, right? So let's say it's a $10 million deal that I'm building.
Yeah.
I raised $3 million from investors. I don't take any bonus depreciation myself. I give them all to the investors. So you have a $10 million deal worth of bonus depreciation, which is roughly like 2.8, 2.9 million.
But it's only $3 million.
But it's only
equity.
$3 million in equity.
Yep.
So that $3 million equity gets that full 2.8,
Yeah,
2.9 million
Wow.
in depreciation.
Yep. Power of leverage. Responsible leverage.
Responsible leverage, yes.
All right. Awesome. Fernando, you've provided a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Yeah, so I'm always looking to do deals and partner with other investors. I think 30% of our syndications came from somebody that heard us on a podcast and called and say, "Hey, I've got a good piece of land. I got a good self-storage facility. Let's figure out a way that we can do this together." If you want to reach out, the more aggressive way is to just call or text me. My number is 630-408-8090. If you're more of a passive outreach person, you can go to our website, which is SSSE.com. So SamEdward.com. And there's a whole section there if you want to be a buyer, if you want to be a seller, if you want to be an investor. If you just want to talk to me, you can schedule a call. My calendar is on there as well if you want to schedule a call. So feel free to reach out.
I'm happy you said your phone number on there because I reach out to you. I connect you maybe with somebody 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And I always go to Jason Marcordes and ask him for your cell phone because I never can find it saved. I never save it. So like I already thought about it before this. I'm like, you text me this morning. I'm like, I gotta save this number.
With cost, I can't put us on the thread. I saved it.
Yeah.
All right. Our Chicago fact. Who are we playing for? Who's the sponsor?
All right. So we're playing for Jerry Bledsoe. So Jerry, if myself or Fernando gets this question right, you get a $50 gift card brought to you by today's sponsor, Realia and Associates, for tax and testing.
All right. We got a U of I grad over here, I believe. There we go. We got the Illini, so I had to incorporate them, obviously. So your question is, University of Illinois has graduated how many astronauts? And an astronaut is someone who logged X amount of hours in space, not worked for NASA, like actually out there in outer space. And your options are 0, 2, 6, or 12.
0 just sounds so obvious. Like you would not make like Illinois look bad. So it can't be 0. So we each get to pick one. So now we got a 66% chance.
Yeah.
Assuming they did more than 0.
I think it'd be higher. I mean, I think we had a really good aerospace engineering program at U of I. So that's usually
Something
a
I would know
prerequisite.
nothing about, but yes.
Yeah. I was adjacent. I was ag bioengineering, so not close enough. But I did have some friends that were aerospace. So it has to be one of the higher ones.
What are the top 3 again?
2, 6, 12.
2, 6. So you go 12, I'll go 6.
Yeah, done.
6 it is.
All right.
Nicely done, boys.
2 just sounds
There you go,
again,
Jerry.
you would have bragged about
Enjoy
2,
that
I guess.
$50.
All right, Jerry, you get a $50 gift card. Nice job. Good question. Woo! That was good. I love when they win in the end. So Fernando, thanks for coming on. Tom, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for
Listeners,
having me.
please reach out to us. We want to hear what you got going on. Go to straightupchicagoinvestor.com. You can reach out to us there or send us an instant message over on Instagram and we'll get back to you right away. So we'd love to hear from you. And if you know anyone that'd be a great guest, let us know as well too. And don't forget to leave us a review. Fernando, thank you. Tom, thank you.
Thanks,
Listeners,
guys.
we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.